In this learning section called Self-Directed Learning and the Impact of Choice and Autonomy, we first explore the concept of self-directed learning, where individuals take the initiative and responsibility for their own educational experiences. Through a previous section, we already created the basis where learners had the opportunity to explore the motivation and the mindset that's behind a successful continuous learning process. And here we investigate what kind of approach and tools can support it. Furthermore, we will examine how the power of choice and the sense of autonomy can fuel a desire for continuous learning and enhance the application of knowledge in various contexts.
In an ever-evolving world, the ability to learn independently and apply knowledge effectively is crucial for personal and professional growth. This session will delve into the principles and benefits of self-directed learning, highlighting how autonomy in the learning process can lead to deeper engagement, increased motivation, and greater mastery of skills. By understanding and embracing these concepts, learners can cultivate a lifelong passion for learning and adapt more readily to new challenges and opportunities, which is, once again, very important for a growth mindset, for maintaining motivation, and for becoming more resilient.
The expected learning outcomes for this session are the following: to enhance the abilities for self-directed learning and learn how to set personal learning goals and develop action plans to achieve them, showcasing the capacity to independently navigate educational journey.
To understand the importance as well as the benefits and consequences of choice and autonomy in motivation and learning and how to utilize it. To strengthen the ability to make informed decisions about learning paths, including the management of personal resources and strategies that align with one's interests and strengths.
Welcome to the next section of the module, Desire for Continuous Learning and Application of Knowledge, where with us, you will jump into the wonderful world of learning and creating our own paths to success. You're almost there, so bear with us for a little while longer, and hopefully, after this, you will realize just how important learning is for our personal and professional development, but for a social life as well.
First things first, allow me to ask you a question. Do you think you really know what learning is? I'm sure you know the meaning of the word, but have you ever thought about it thoroughly? Did you ever go deeper than the surface? If not, well, this is the perfect opportunity to do so. Let's start from the simplest ones and gradually build our way up. Malcolm Knowles defined learning as the process of gaining knowledge and expertise. Simple enough, yet effective, and it immediately lights a light bulb over your head, and you start to understand it, of course, based on your previous experience with this concept.
The Oxford Languages Dictionary defines learning as the acquisition of knowledge or skills through study, experience, or being taught. Now, you might already be starting to think about school and the environment of learning. Basically, we added different processes of learning into the definition itself that were left out of the previous, maybe a bit broader definition.
Learning is a transformative process of taking in information that, when internalized and mixed with what we have experienced, changes what we know and builds on what we do. It's based on input, intentional process, and reflection. It is what changes us, a definition by Marsha Connor and Tony Bingham from the book The New Social Learning, a guide to transforming organizations through social media.
Now we are getting somewhere. It could all seem like a wordplay, but let's now ask ourselves, do we think the same thing about learning when we look at the first definition? And do we think the same when we look at this last definition? Whatever your answer might be, bear with us for just one more moment as we look at a couple more definitions about learning, who are giving it yet another dimension.
According to Brockett and Roger, 1994, learning is a personal act of individual to make full use of his potential. It is a process of self-actualization to its maximum level. The basic characteristics of self-actualizing people are they have tolerance for ambiguity, acceptance of self and others, and peak experiences that lead to personal transformation through new insights. This definition is referenced from the article The Definitions of Learning by various scholars for 2023, written by Meister Harrison for the portal Project Gurus.
You can see that here in the definition of learning itself, they're talking about self-actualization. And you will remember that self-actualization is at the top of the Maslow's hierarchy of needs. And what's more important, you will remember, hopefully, that not a lot of people can reach and satisfy this need, at least according to Maslow's theory.
Now, the final definition here, we will use the book How Learning Works, 7 Research-Based Principles for Smart Teaching 2010, authors Susan Ambrose et al., that defines learning as a process that leads to change, which occurs as a result of experience and increases the potential for improved performance and future learning. Even though the previous 2 definitions go into more detail, this one might seem like one of the broadest and even most correct definitions of learning.
Why it's especially interesting to us is because of its last part, increases the potential for improved performance and future learning. The more you learn, the more you will probably want, or should we say the more you will understand why it's extremely important and why you need to be persistent to come ever so close to realizing your potential.
Let's start with the basics and get back to ourselves when we are children. When we've only just begun to write our story. When we started to explore and started to roam around the world. We found an interesting take on what drives our education from the earliest age possible from the Alliance for Self-Directed Education. And we will first look at these 4 drives and then try to extend them a bit to give ourselves a brief insight into why lifelong learning is important.
On the first level of our drive for learning, something that is unmistakably in us from our very birth is curiosity. As soon as we're born, we're curious. We want to see things, look at things, analyze, touch, grab, use, etc. With each moment that goes by, we tend to look at some things more than the others, something that attracts our attention, something new, and we have this innate need to find out what this particular object is for. What is its purpose? How we can use it to our own benefit. For most of us, this curious feeling stays with us for the rest of our life, but not always and necessarily on the same level.
You know, when you're just a baby, when you see something, you will probably go for it until you do it or until you're stopped. When we grow up, somewhere along the way, we lose this level of determination, and even though the curiosity is still here with no determination and no actions, we can slowly start to lose interest, a spark that was, for a brief moment, there again. We are focusing on this aspect here as it shows us the importance of creating or changing our mindset, the importance of taking action.
Next up is playfulness. In this very concept, we can see why so many organizations nowadays start to turn to gamification for education purposes. It's because of something that was with us all along and something that most of us have inside of us. What is important is that we can very hardly think that someone's playing for educational purposes. It's always about the game itself, but that game can, on another level, provide real, concrete educational benefits. The main difference between a game and learning from a game is how it's set up and what we're doing in it.
Now, you have probably heard somewhere the quote that the world is your playground, and that's not so far from the truth. Occasionally, we can return to our younger selves, or we can look for and create opportunities for ourselves to learn through playful narratives. Also, some of the highest grossing industries in the world have come from our playfulness. Football, stock market, etc. If you really think about it, both are games in their own realities.
The third dimension, the third drive, is sociability. From the moment we are born, we are carrying that social trait inside of us. Through our playfulness, we came to a conclusion that we wanted to play with others, often that we want to compete with others, especially in sports and the modern day society, for example, looking and competing for a job. Through our curiosity, we figured out that we want to learn from and with others, that we want to work with others towards common goals, that we want to create and maintain relationships, and so on.
Through time, realize that the more we see, the more we communicate, the more we explore, the more we learn. But one other dimension for sure is that we learned that we tend to compare ourselves to each other. We want to know what others know. We want to learn how they learned. We want to share our own opinions. We want to listen, but we want to be heard. In order to be able to do all of that, especially nowadays when the world is rapidly evolving and information is available everywhere, we have to keep on learning.
The final and a bit additional learned dimension is the so-called planfulness, or simply planning. Of all the creatures out there, we have evolved our capacities to think ahead to the fullest. We're able to anticipate, we're able to set goals, think of a set of actions to reach those goals, compare this with what we achieved, in one word, plan. But of course, this is something that usually develops slower than the other dimensions and traits that we previously elaborated. To be able to plan and to anticipate, we must learn. We might know what we want, but to figure out a way to get there, we have to learn.
Learning is an integral part of our lives, and we're learning from the moment we are born, even though sometimes it's hard to realize it. When you're talking to your friends about a certain topic, you might be learning as their perspective might be different than yours. When you're practicing a certain sport, you might be learning about teamwork, about cohesion, about respect, without even knowing it. There are plenty of examples like this, and we're sure that you can think of some right now. So, let's proceed with a task. Write down the last thing you think that you learned, and write down how you learned it.
We're on the right track, knowing why learning is important to us, and we think that you're already close to understanding it now. Going through different sources, we made up our own list of the crucial long-term benefits of learning. First of all, you see your own personal development reach the levels that you want, and sometimes the levels you didn't even think were possible.
With learning, you are a subject to visible and invisible progress over time. The more effort you put in, the more you challenge yourself, the more you move forward. Simple as that. But on the other hand, when you stop, you can sometimes lose twice as much as what you might have gained. Through learning, you will see yourself getting regular confidence boosts that are a result of learning itself, reaching your goals, completing different challenges, overcoming obstacles and setbacks, and so on.
The second in line is that the learning that leads to personal development, growth, and confidence boost will usually open up new opportunities for you. You will see yourself become more capable, but also more eager over time. This will bring new job opportunities, new career opportunities in general. You are more likely to meet new, interesting, influential people. You will open more opportunities for yourself to grow. Let's face it, today's labor market, today's sports world, everything is a sort of a competition. In order to find and use opportunities, we have to create opportunities for ourselves, and we do so through learning and through being able to adapt.
That being said, through learning, we're opening up a new perspective, a new outlook, a new point of view on various topics. Sometimes, if we're completely honest with ourselves, we might get caught up in our own opinion about something that we developed years ago, as a child even. When we give ourselves the possibility to learn, when we're open to new experiences, and when we are open to other people's perspectives, we are able to change for the better.
It does not necessarily mean that we will immediately listen and adopt a certain perspective, but it means that we looked at a topic from a couple of different angles and we've become more able to draw conclusions for ourselves. This leads us to being able to adapt more, thus being able to adjust to different situations and challenges, and thus, finally, becoming more skillful and reliable in our efforts.
Last but not least, learning and everything previously mentioned leads to a certain amount of satisfaction and happiness. The more we learn and the more we know, the more capable we are to become successful, to be able to provide for ourselves and for others that depend on us, the more we're able to achieve, and ultimately this will lead to satisfaction in different aspects of our life.
You have, by now, learned why motivation and learning are important. You have learned what they are in the first place. You have learned how to maintain motivation and stay persistent and determined, and now it's important to learn and understand lifelong learning. We presume that by now you're combining the pieces of this puzzle, and, of course, if you understand learning, then adding lifelong to it is almost self-explanatory. Still, we would like to emphasize a couple more important things when it comes to lifelong learning, which might make you rethink everything and stay committed.
First of all, the current state of affairs in the world has evolved to a point where we have slowly abandoned the labor-based economy, and we have turned to a knowledge-oriented. The shift to a knowledge-based economy reflects a fundamental change in how value is generated and what skills are necessary for economic success. Compared to the previous labor-based economy, where we relied heavily on physical labor, manufacturing, and manual tasks for economic productivity and growth, we now rely more on intellectual capabilities, technological advancements, and the ability to adapt to rapid changes in the global economic landscape.
What do we conclude from this? That knowledge wasn't necessary or powerful before, and nowadays we have finally started to value it. That would be completely wrong. Practice, learning, engagement were always important, as the evolution of work, of learning, motivation, us, wouldn't be possible without it. The thing that changes mostly is the perspective and the recognition of value, which shows that lifelong learning is ever so important.
But what is lifelong learning exactly? Well, the concept of lifelong learning understands self-initiated and self-motivated education-related actions that lead to personal development and personal growth. Lifelong learning is a lifelong process of building towards progress in all aspects of human life. Often is understood to be considered outside of formal education such as schools, universities, corporate training, etc., exactly because it's self-initiated. However, learning is learning, and if it's happening outside our regular mandatory education, it's lifelong learning.
So, if it's not formal, how can we learn? That's same as saying, if somebody doesn't force me to do it, why would I do it? If this happens, we recommend quickly changing your mentality. There are a number of ways of how one can learn, and with the information being available at every step of our way, especially in the online world, there are a number of opportunities. Let's explore some of them briefly.
First, we have informal learning. This is the type of learning that's happening every day, even when we're not aware of it. It doesn't have a structured process. It doesn't provide any kind of certification or a reward except on a personal, intrinsic level. And it's not provided by anybody else but us. The informal learning is where we're truly bossing our own learning process. You're wondering how this is manifested. Okay, what do you think? Is reading a book informal learning? What about reading a specific article or even the news?
Well, yes, of course it is. Preferably, you're targeting the information that help you progress in your own learning plan, about which we will learn some moments later. But even if you're not, it's still a learning process. You saw something new, you read a new insight on the specific topic, etc. What about if you travel to another part of your country, or a different country where you've never been?
Still informal learning. Maybe you will boost your planning and organization skills. Maybe you will get rid of a certain fear because you will familiarize yourself with a certain topic. You'll get to know a different culture. And hey, maybe you even learn a foreign word. Also, maybe something will motivate you to shift the direction and the path you're under. You never know.
Do you think you can learn something from your friends, your family, your peers? Exactly, of course you can. You will gain some new perspectives, you will receive more information for your decision making, you might adopt new values, you might discover your secret talents and traits. Do you have any hobbies that relax you and give you satisfaction? If you do, that's also how you're learning. Maybe you enjoy taking photos and it will interest you to the level where you start exploring more, adapting, improving. Maybe you like cooking and you will learn new recipes. Well, we hope you understand this now.
The other concept is non-formal learning. Non-formal learning doesn't provide you with formal recognition, but still provides structure and organization. It will usually take place in your local communities, offered by different stakeholders, like, for example, non-governmental organizations, civil society. Of course, if you thought about some online course, you are just about right.
Usually, upon completing a non-formal education of any kind, you will also receive a certificate or some sort of confirmation that you completed this course as a reward. Non-formal education is often passively generating advantage, not only on a personal, but also professional level, as effort is often recognized, and the knowledge, as we learned a moment ago, highly valued.
So the concrete examples would be online courses organized by various stakeholders, for example, this one that you're completing right now, community courses, seminars, webinars, workshops, training, etc., workplace training, adult education, etc.
From the moment we started this course, we have always emphasized you, the learner, and you have been, from the first moment on, put into the center of the learning process. It seems only logical for the module of continuous learning and application of knowledge. Nobody can do it for you. Nobody can force you to do it. It's all about you. Of course, there are a lot of factors that can influence and direct our learning process. But in the end, it's up to you how that's going to end. It's about your motivation. It's about your habits. It's about your mindset, your determination, your plan, and your choices.
This is an excellent introduction to self-directed learning. The name itself already gives you a clue. It's the kind of learning and education that derives from self, from an individual. To try and explain this further, self-directed learning is a process in which an individual takes the reins of their learning process in their own hands. This is the process controlled from the beginning and the signal of the need for learning until the end and achieving the desired learning outcomes by the learner itself.
As always, let's see one example. You are a high school student athlete who is playing football, and you have just become captain of your football team. What an honor. Everything's going great, but you are aware that your public speaking skills are not so good, and that can be crucial because you're always going to be asked to attend interviews, press conferences, etc. You're not waiting around for somebody to tell you that you need to address these skills. You're not waiting for somebody to teach you.
You decide to make a plan, identify learning outcomes, set a strategy, and go for it. That's exactly what self-directed learning is all about. You are taking the ownership of the learning process. Imagine how important that is for lifelong learning. But as with everything related to learning, self-directed learning is also a process. And in the next section, we explore what steps you need to take in order to be as efficient as possible in leading yourself through learning.
Okay, before we proceed with the process of self-directed learning, let's focus on some of the most important benefits of this approach. There are a lot, for sure, but we extract some that seem the most connected to this particular course.
First of all, self-directed learning offers a lot of flexibility, as this is a completely learner-centered approach, and the learners are setting up the whole learning process. They are also able to choose when they will learn, where and how much time and resources they will dedicate to their learning process in a given moment. This also helps with staying focused, staying sharp, and adjusting the learning to their learning style.
One benefit that was already mentioned, and that benefit is why we're talking about self-directed learning in the first place, and that is the promotion of lifelong learning practices. Once you, as a learner, start creating your own learning process, you are more likely to end up developing a habit and maintaining motivation for learning for a longer period of time.
Even though you will probably occasionally include others in your learning process when the support is necessary, most of it you will be doing on your own. What this means is that you're going to identify the resources for your learning process. You're going to evaluate them and you're going to approve and utilize them. Such a process can significantly enhance the critical thinking skills that are extremely important for that particular process, for future learning purposes, but for life in general as well.
The last benefit that we're going to point out here is that this learning, according to LinkedIn and their article 5 Benefits of Self-Directed Learning, fosters independence and autonomy. The learners are the managers of their own learning, which means they are responsible for all the decision-making. They are taking the initiatives, they need to be on top of the problems. Fostering independence and autonomy not only provides additional value for learning, but also for personal and professional growth. We also wanted to point this out because as we're nearing closer to the end of this module, we will also talk about choice and autonomy as big parts of the lifelong learning process.
Now we finally enter the real deal, process of self-directed learning. In these next couple of points, you will learn how self-directed learning is set up and what it will take for you to master and control this process. There are some different approaches to this topic, but everything revolves around the somehow same, similar phases. Here as shown, you see the most popular approach that includes 4 stages of self-directed learning.
Assessing readiness and identifying the need to learn, setting goals, engaging in the learning process, and evaluate. The little circles here are supposed to symbolize how this process goes in circles. Once you're finished with the evaluation, you're going back from the beginning.
So to kick things off, we're first looking at the assessing readiness and identifying the need to learn. Well, self-directed learning starts with motivation, and that's usually intrinsic, the motivation that drives us forward for our own sake. However, it can be either or even a combination of motivation. There are no specific rules here.
Let's say that it starts with a signal that shows you that there's a certain knowledge, a skill, a value, or similar that you need to acquire to proceed. This signal can also show you that you want to learn for your own satisfaction, for your own personal development, that you want to learn because you want to learn.
Once again, in this very moment, try to reflect on how everything you've learned so far is connected. Remember, mindset leads us to creating habit. Habits lead us to motivation. Motivation keeps continuous learning process alive and therefore generates happiness and satisfaction. All these internal and external activities will keep us in the loop and will keep us in touch with the reality, which means that along the way, we might discover and rediscover our own need and motivation for learning.
Sometimes this can come from personal cues, sometimes from professional, where we need specific knowledge or skills to excel in our career. Sometimes the social aspect in comparison with others will influence it, and so on.
When we realize what is that we need to assess our readiness to learn. You might wonder why this is important, and you will probably be able to realize it later on, but let's try to explain.
Assessing readiness to learn is a critical step in the educational process. It ensures that learners are prepared and equipped to engage with new material effectively, leading to better learning outcomes, efficient use of resources, and a more personalized and supportive learning experience. What is most important when we honestly assess ourselves as the leaders of our own learning process? We're able to propose realistic goals and learning outcomes to achieve.
Do you remember when we talked about challenging ourselves just enough, not too much, not too little, just enough to keep our motivation and satisfaction levels high, to feel that success feeling every once in a while? Well, by getting to know ourselves, by identifying what we want to do, why, our capacities, our capabilities, resources, etc., we are only then able to set realistic goals for ourselves.
If we don't do that, we are risking getting demotivated, losing our focus and determination, and seeing ourselves fail. By addressing readiness, learners create an environment that fosters motivation, reduces barriers, and enhances the overall effectiveness of the learning process.
Setting goals is your second step in the self-directed learning adventure, and we can say these are the core elements, your guiding light. Through defining goals, you will not only be defining what you want to achieve, you will also define how you want to achieve it.
According to the signal, to the needs and the readiness identified in the previous steps, you will set your learning goals and the learning outcomes that you want to achieve by the end of your own learning process. It's important to keep everything in line and, as mentioned earlier, be realistic and keep the bar high just enough for it to be challenging.
There is something that can help you set your goals appropriately, with the high chances of achieving them. You've probably heard about it already. It's called SMART goals. Let's see what this means.
Specific, which means that you're going to clearly define what you want to achieve, and you're going to be as specific as possible. So you're not going to say something in general, like that you want to be a successful athlete. You're aiming to go for something like this. I want to complete this course while maintaining my training commitments to raise my chances of becoming successful on and off the field. For this, I'm going to complete all mandatory assignments for the day and attend this course in the evenings for 2 hours every day, from 7 to 9 p.m, while I will rest on Sundays.
You see, you're making a plan simultaneously. You have what you want to achieve, but you also added how you will achieve it. We already mentioned how being specific is important, how writing something down helps your cause. Now we're just repeating what we already mentioned somewhere through a different approach, but it all comes down to the same thing.
Measurable. For example, I want to complete this course in 30 days, or I want to keep my GPA above 4, or I want to score 30 goals this season. It all adds up and it gives you a platform to assess what you accomplished and how far along you've come, or how far are you behind. This also provides a great basis for improving and directing future activities better.
Achievable. You will not say that you want to complete this course in 2 days because it's not realistic and it will not be achievable for you. You see, we once again came to challenging ourselves realistically, setting the challenges difficult enough but yet too realistic for us to achieve.
Relevant. Keep your goals relevant for you, in line with your motivation and aspirations. Don't set your goals based on somebody else's life, based on their resources and capacities, because your situation is different. Adjust and keep it self-related. For example, the goal might be to balance academic and athletic responsibilities to ensure future career opportunities. Why is this relevant? Excelling in both academics and sports is essential for maintaining scholarship and exploring professional sports opportunities.
Time-bound, your goal needs to have a timeline, and this is extremely important for your motivation as well. If you say to yourself that you want to score 30 goals, does that mean your career this season, half season, or... You see, there's a big difference, and that difference keeps it challenging for us, thus keeps maintaining motivation levels.
Here's often nowadays mentioned R, which is not exactly the part of SMART concept logically, but it does feel like there's a place for it. That's why a moment ago we set the plan so that you would rest on Sundays. Maybe on Sunday you will have a game and you physically need to rest. Maybe you will have other responsibilities. Maybe you want to do something fun. This element says that you deserve to reward yourself every once in a while for completing a certain task or reaching a goal.
Well, when you've gone through excessive previous 2 steps, there's nothing left for you than to engage in the learning process. Engaging in the learning process involves actively applying the strategies and plans established during the goal-setting phase. This includes participating in lectures, discussions, and hands-on activities, utilizing resources like textbooks, online courses, and study groups. It requires consistent effort, focus, and dedication to understanding and practicing new concepts. Monitoring progress and seeking feedback are crucial to ensure continuous improvement and adaptation of learning technique. And this already hints at the last phase of this 4-step way to successful self-directed learning.
This is where you reach the full circle before you're ready to start from scratch, either with the adapted strategies for the same cause or with a different cause and another challenge, depending on what you want to achieve, but also the outcomes that are analysed in this phase.
What better way to talk about this last phase than through one of the key competencies recognised by the EU, previously known as Learning to Learn competence, and now a part of the personal, social and learning to learn competence is an integral part of the Youth Pass certificate, a formal recognition often used for Erasmus Plus projects and the various learning mobilities implemented under the Erasmus Plus programme.
This key competency actually shows what self-directed learning is all about. It is about setting learning objectives, reflecting on learning strengths and weaknesses, and the ways one learns the best. It involves organizing own learning, self-motivation, assessing and monitoring the development, collecting outcomes, and acknowledging the changes that one has gone through. This definition is taken from the article Youth Pass and the revised key competences from the Youth Pass.
Why we're talking about this right now is because it provides a couple of great questions one can use to assess their learning process. And according to the same article mentioned above, they are the following. How did you plan your learning objectives? To what extent have you reached them? Did you learn things that you did not plan or expect to learn? Which? How did you learn? When was learning easy for you and when was it challenging? What did you discover about yourself? In what ways do you think your participation in the project has changed you? How did you approach group work and how did you cooperate with others during the project?
This last question is project-oriented, but it can be applied in this case as well if you seek external help and support, and if you use, for example, non-formal learning opportunities. One of such opportunities are Erasmus Plus mobilities, which you should definitely give a closer look.
Because other than learning, they provide opportunities to connect, to travel, to experience, to rethink, and to develop. When you answer all of these questions, you should see where you're at. What are the results and what could or should be done in order to improve?